Now, let's go back in time once more and imagine the scene of a British car that crossed oceans in crates, rolled off the assembly lines in Tokyo bound for Melbourne, and became a familiar sight in American garages. A car so important to Britain's recovery that it accounted for almost a tenth of a manufacturer's entire production destined for foreign lands. And yet, 3 decades later, the company that built it would be sold for the price of a cup of coffee. You lived through the 1950s and 1960s. You remember when Made in Britain meant something. You probably knew someone who owned a Hillman Minx. Maybe you even owned one yourself. But do you know how this unassuming family sedan became one of Britain's most important export products, only to see its parent company handed over to the French for $1? The story of the Hillman Minx is more than just the rise and fall of yet another British manufacturer. It's a window into an era when Britain dominated global car exports, when the government required manufacturers to send 75% of production overseas to keep the economy afloat, and when a small sedan became the face of British engineering around the world. It's also about how fortunes change rapidly, how American ambitions reshape industries, and how a legacy of pride is reduced to nominal sums on balance sheets. The 1950s represented the golden age of the British automotive industry. While Europe was rebuilding from devastation and American manufacturers couldn't meet domestic demand, Britain became the world's largest exporter of cars. At the center of it was the Rutes Group, and at the heart of Rutes was the Hillman Minx. This is its story. Topic 1. The post-war export imperative. Britain emerged from World War II victorious but bankrupt. The country had spent everything defeating Hitler. Steel, the lifeblood of car manufacturing, was desperately scarce, rationed with iron control. The government solution was both simple and brutal. British car makers could have access to precious steel supplies, but only if they exported at least 75% of their production. Export or die, that was the mantra echoing through British industry in 1947. The Rutes Group, which owned Hillman alongside Humber, Singer, and Sunbeam, embraced this challenge with remarkable enthusiasm. Under the leadership of brothers William and Reginald Rutes, the company had already established itself as Britain's largest distributor of cars and trucks by 1924. When they moved into manufacturing by acquiring Hillman in 1929, they brought that export mentality with them. By the early 1950s, the Rutes Group was exporting an extraordinary 70% of its production. Think about that. 7 out of every 10 cars rolling off the Ryton production line in Coventry were destined for foreign shores. By the mid-1950s, this translated to approximately 70,000 cars annually finding homes overseas. Many traveled as CKD kits, completely knocked down, to be assembled in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and throughout the British Commonwealth. But North American exports always went fully assembled, ready to drive straight from the dock. The Minx itself had been around since 1932, when it debuted as a modest body-on-frame saloon with a 1,185 cubic centimeter engine producing 30 brake horsepower. It was upgraded with a 4-speed transmission in 1934 and received styling updates, most noticeably a slightly V-shaped grille. During the war years, from 1940 through 1944, Hillman produced both military utility versions and limited civilian models for essential use. The Minx chassis formed the basis of the Hillman 10 horsepower, a simple 2-person cab with a covered load area behind that served military needs admirably. After peace returned in 1945, the Minx resumed civilian production with virtually the same design it had worn before the war. The early post-war Mark I and Mark II versions kept the same 1,185 cubic centimeter side valve engine and the same overall shape. Production resumed. Britain needed cars desperately, both for domestic use and for export to earn foreign currency. But by 1948, it was clear that pre-war styling wouldn't cut it in the modern market. The Mark III Minx emerged with a more contemporary 3-box design, featuring a proper protruding boot that nodded to the modern ponton style, by then replacing the old flatback look inherited from models that had debuted in the 1930s. These early post-war Minxes found ready markets, particularly in the United States. In 1950, Austin and Hillman together split about 9,000 American sales between them, with Austin taking roughly 60% and Hillman 40%. Not huge numbers by Detroit standards, but significant enough that the Rutes brothers took direct personal interest. Brian Rutes, son of Sir William, oversaw operations from New York, while Timothy Rutes, son of Sir Reginald, managed the Los Angeles operation from 1950 through 1956. The brothers' hands-on approach paid dividends. East Coast Americans saw their first television advertisement featuring a Hillman Minx convertible in 1950, making Rutes an early adopter of TV advertising for imported cars. The ads emphasized the Minx's easy-to-handle size and lightweight compared to the increasingly enormous American cars of the era. The early 50s Minx looked like a scaled-down Plymouth, which probably helped American buyers feel comfortable with the unfamiliar British brand. That Americanish look wasn't accidental. Rutes understood that exports required appealing to foreign tastes, not just shipping British cars overseas and hoping for the best. Topic 2. The Audax Revolution. By the mid-1950s, the Minx range desperately needed modernization. The Mark 8, introduced in 1954, took a crucial step forward with a new overhead valve engine of 1,390 cubic centimeters. This was the engine that would carry forward into the next generation, but the body still looked dated compared to increasingly modern competition from Ford, Austin, and Vauxhall. The Rutes brothers understood they needed something bold to maintain their export success. They turned to one of the world's most famous industrial designers, Raymond Loewy, the French-American stylist responsible for everything from the Studebaker Starliner to the Coca-Cola bottle. Loewy's organization had been involved in designing stunning Studebaker coupes in 1953, and the Rutes brothers wanted some of that American flair for their new range. The result was the Audax series, a name derived from the Latin word meaning bold, and bold it was in a very British way. The styling combined American-inspired details like hooded headlights and subtle tail fins with traditional British proportions and restraint. It was transatlantic without being brash, modern without being outrageous. This was key to its export success, particularly in America where buyers wanted something different but not too foreign. The Audax platform actually debuted in October 1955 with the Sunbeam Rapier, a sporty two-door coupe with an aluminum head version of the 1,390 cubic centimeter engine and twin carburetors. But the real volume seller would be the four-door Hillman Minx Series 1, launched in May 1956. The timing couldn't have been worse. Britain was in the midst of the Suez Crisis, facing fuel rationing and economic uncertainty. Yet the new Minx became an instant success both at home and abroad. The Series 1 Minx featured the overhead valve engine, a first for a post-war Hillman. Power output was modest by American standards but adequate for a British family car. According to a test by the Motor magazine in 1958 of a Series 3 Deluxe saloon with the 1,494 cubic centimeter engine, the car achieved a top speed of 76.9 miles per hour and could accelerate from 0 to 60 in 25.4 seconds. Fuel consumption averaged 31.8 miles per imperial gallon. The test car cost £794, including £265 in purchase tax. This was competitive pricing for a well-equipped family saloon in the British market. What made the Audax Minx truly special was its combination of practicality, reliability, and a touch of style that resonated across different markets. In Britain, it became the sensible choice for families and business users, doctors, and commercial travelers. Overseas, particularly in America, it offered compact efficiency wrapped in styling that didn't look too foreign to eyes accustomed to Detroit's offerings. By 1957, nearly 10% of Hillman's entire production was heading to the United States. Think about what that means. 1 out of every 10 Minxes built found an American buyer, The cars were right-sized for American buyers seeking better fuel economy, and the styling, thanks to Loewe's influence, felt familiar enough to be acceptable while being different enough to be interesting. The Audax range expanded to cover multiple market segments through badge engineering, a Ruti's specialty. The Hillman Minx served as the base model. Above it sat the Singer Gazelle, adding luxury trim, better instrumentation, and upgraded equipment. The sporty Sunbeam Rapier sat at the top, with twin carburetors and competition success in rallying to boost its appeal. Even Humber got into the act with badge-engineered variants in markets like New Zealand. Each year brought updates and improvements. The Series 2 arrived in 1957, featuring revised styling details and improved trim. The Series 3 in 1958 brought an enlarged engine. The Series 3A came in 1959 with the 1,494 cubic centimetre engine, though this had been available in Britain since late 1957. The Series 3B followed in 1960 with further refinements, then the 3C in 1961 with disc brakes and other improvements. Interestingly, there was no Series 4. Roots jumped straight to Series 5 in 1963, which brought a restyled roof and rear window. The Series 6, the final iteration of the Audax design, arrived in 1965 with the engine enlarged again to 1,725 cubic centimeters and featuring 5 main bearings instead of 3 for greater reliability and smoother running. Topic 3. Global reach. The Minx's export success extended beyond direct sales. In '53, Isuzu acquired rights to build Minxes and Comma vans, paying £25 royalties per car after 2,000 units. On October 25, '53, the first Isuzu Hillman rolled off the line at their new factory. Initially CKD assembly, Japanese government pressure through Mighty forced localization. By November '55, local production hit 30%. August '56 brought engines and gearboxes, jumping to 50%. During '57, major body components went local, reaching 100%. On October 28, '57, exactly 4 years after the first CKD car, the first completely Japanese-made Hillman emerged. Isuzu Hillmans remained in production until June '64, following British updates through Marks and early Audax series. Marketing materials were essentially British translations, even featuring Western people in illustrations. Similar arrangements existed worldwide. Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Italy, and numerous countries assembled or imported Minxes, making it truly global decades before globalization became buzzwords. Topic 4. American Dreams End. America represented the Minx's greatest opportunity and biggest disappointment. Early to mid-50s were golden for imports. Detroit built enormous V8s with flamboyant styling. Room existed for something smaller, economical, maneuverable. The Minx fit perfectly initially. Loewe styling didn't look too foreign. Size made parking easy. Quality was acceptable. Then Detroit noticed. When the Ford Falcon launched in '60, it devastated medium import sales overnight. Larger than a Minx, 6-cylinder powered, carrying the Ford name with full dealer support, competitively priced. Why buy unfamiliar British when you could get Ford? Hillman's American sales collapsed. The Series 5 brought modern looks in '63. Roots concentrated American efforts on Sunbeam in '64, renaming it Sunbeam Minx. Sales didn't improve. Final Audax Minxes were excellent cars. Larger 1,725 cubic centimetre engine, 4 speeds or Borg-Warner automatic, well made, good to drive. Strong British sellers through the end. But in America, finished. Consider the Plymouth Cricket. The Hillman Avenger sold at Plymouth dealers from '71. Total sales? 27,600 cars. Barely more than the '59 Minx's single-year peak, gone by '74. The Minx didn't fail from inferior quality or poor design. Domestic manufacturers simply brought enormous resources, dealer networks, and familiar brands to the compact market. The attractive British alternative became irrelevant once Ford, Chevrolet, and Plymouth offered compacts. Topic 5. The Chrysler takeover. By early 60s, Rootes faced serious financial trouble. Heavy investment in the Hillman Imp, a sophisticated rear-engined car launched 63, should have succeeded. More advanced than the Mini in many ways, it suffered early reliability problems. Worse, government forced Rootes to build it at Linwood, Scotland, 300 miles from Coventry. Linwood became disaster. Inexperienced workforce, poor quality, insane logistics. Components travelled 600 miles for machining at Ryton, returned to Linwood for assembly. Completed, Imps travelled south again for distribution. Industrial disputes at London Body Pressing in 61 cut profits 85%. Strike action at Linwood and warranty claims left no money for development. Enter Chrysler under chairman Lynn Townsend, building multinational presence to rival Ford and GM. June 64, Chrysler took 30% ordinary capital, 50% non-voting preference. Control stayed British initially. Lord William Rootes died October 64. His son William Jeffrey became second Lord Rootes and chairman. Financial deterioration continued. During 66, Chrysler increased to 45% ordinary, 65% non-voting. January 67 brought 2/3 of capital. Chrysler had control. Year ending July 67 showed pre-tax profit of £3.8 million, first since 64, versus £10.7 million loss the prior year. But lack of investment funds was striking. June 30th, 70, Rootes became Chrysler United Kingdom. Rootes marks progressively disappeared through the 70s. Only Hillman remained by 77, then it too was shelved for Chrysler. Topic 6. The $1 sale. By mid-70s, Chrysler's European adventure hemorrhaged money. Former Simca in France was moderately successful, but former Rootes in Britain bled cash. Industrial relations remained terrible. Frequent strikes disrupted production, quality suffered. The range struggled against Ford, Vauxhall, and imports. Chrysler itself was in serious American trouble, caught flat-footed by the 73 oil crisis and consumer shift towards smaller cars. Quality problems with Dodge, Aspen, and Plymouth Volare brought massive warranty costs and reputation damage. The company was losing money, lots of it. 78 brought Lee Iacocca as president after Ford fired him. He found Chrysler near bankruptcy. Immediately wielding the axe, he offloaded Chrysler Europe. 78 saw Chrysler Europe sold to PSA Peugeot Citroën for $1. $1, a cup of coffee's price. Everything the Rootes brothers built over decades valued at $1. More existed than that. PSA assumed roughly $200 million in liabilities, took factories, workforce, ongoing production, all associated headaches. Chrysler retained 15% PSA equity, gradually sold over following decades. For Iacocca, pragmatic business. Chrysler needed American focus. European operations were distraction and drain. Cut loose, concentrate resources where they might help. Iacocca later stated adamantly that Chrysler erred buying Rootes initially. PSA rebadged former Chrysler and Simca models under revived Talbot from August 79. First Rootes model discontinued was the Hunter in 79, tooling sold to Iran. The Paykan, based on Hunter platform, ran until 2004. Linwood closed 81. Ryton survived, becoming PSA's UK base, producing Peugeots until December 2006 closure. Topic 7. Lessons from the Minx. What lessons does the Minx story hold? First, it succeeded meeting real needs. In post-war Britain, reliable family transportation at reasonable price. In export markets, compact efficiency before domestic manufacturers caught on. Well-engineered, attractively styled, built-in volume for economies of scale. Second, good design mattered. Loewe's involvement gave transatlantic appeal, helping export competition. Bold enough to be modern, restrained enough to avoid quickly dating. Third, quality and reliability proved crucial. When the Imp suffered early problems, it damaged entire route's reputation. The Minx built solid dependability, serving it throughout production. Fourth, dangers of undercapitalization and poor strategy. Linwood was political, not business sense. Distance from suppliers and quality problems contributed significantly to financial troubles. The Imp rushed into production before fully developed, bringing warranty costs draining resources. Fifth, corporate fortunes change quickly. Chrysler thought European operations would help compete globally with Ford and GM. Within a decade, those operations became liabilities, shed at any price. The nominal dollar reflected not asset value but Chrysler's desperation to exit. Finally, even successful products can't overcome broader forces and dysfunction. The Minx was good, sold well in Britain throughout production, but couldn't save routes from troubles elsewhere, couldn't overcome industrial relations plaguing British manufacturing, couldn't compete once domestic manufacturers developed compacts. The Hillman Minx, particularly the Audax from 56 through 67, represented the best of British automotive engineering in the export era. It crossed oceans, served families faithfully, carried the Union Jack worldwide. From Tokyo to Melbourne, Johannesburg to Los Angeles, the Minx became familiar and respected. But the Minx also symbolized how Britain's automotive industry lost its way. Post-war export boom couldn't last once other countries rebuilt. Undercapitalized British manufacturers couldn't match American giants' resources or emerging Japanese efficiency. Industrial strife, poor strategy, inadequate investment took their toll. When Chrysler sold European operations for $1 in '78, an era ended. The Hillman name was gone. The Minx nameplate retired in '70. Factories that once exported 70% of production were now liabilities assumed by a French company in a fire sale. Those who owned a Minx, drove one, remember them from youth, were part of this story. You experienced firsthand what made it successful: solid construction, adequate performance, practical design, that touch of low-E style bringing flair to British engineering. We'd love hearing your Minx memories in comments. Did you own one? What was driving like? What happened to it? Share your stories with fellow enthusiasts appreciating this automotive history. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe and hit that like button. We'll continue exploring classic era cars, the vehicles you remember, manufacturers that shaped the landscape, stories behind them. These aren't just cars. They're history pieces, memories on wheels, connections to when British engineering meant something in world markets. Thank you for watching. The Hillman Minx may be gone, but its story lives on in memories of those who knew it, and surviving examples enthusiasts keep on roads today. That's a legacy worth preserving.